Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another one of our MGAA Professional Optics session. I'm delighted to welcome you this afternoon. For those that don't know who I am, a quick introduction for myself before we get the session underway. I'm Manveen Tuhil. I'm the Learning and Insight Manager here at the MGAA. I'm delighted to welcome you to our session with Empower Development, First Job, New Challenges, and how managers can attract and support early talent. Before we do start and I hand over to Louise and Sam today, just a few housekeeping points, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. You'll notice that your microphone and camera can't be turned on at the moment. It's by design, so please don't panic and think nothing's working. It's just to make sure we're maximising bandwidth and reducing disruption for the session so you can get the most out of it today. And we can enable them as we get to the Q&A session. You'll notice that we do have a chat and a Q&A option, and that's to give you both the resource to ask questions directly or anonymously. So you can use the chat to post your questions and that will come through with your name. If you would like to ask a question anonymously today, you can go to the Q&A. Just before you post your question, you can click the toggle to do that anonymously. So please do feel free to use the one that you find will support you today. And we do encourage that you ask questions. They're very much welcome. So you can ask them throughout, and if we can't address any as we go along, we'll come back to that during the Q&A piece at the end. You'll notice that we will also be removing any AI note-taking tools if we don't have permission to use them in the session. So I do ask if you have got anything enabled, if you can just turn that off, that would be very much appreciated. We are recording today's session, and a link will be sent to those that have registered, along with our survey together, just to get your thoughts and feedback on our sessions. I will also drop that into the chat towards the end, so if you do have some time to spare today, really appreciate getting your feedback on our content and the sessions that we deliver, so we can continue bringing you fantastic webinars like the one we have today. And then finally, if you find that this is going to support your CPD and your development, you can include it on your CPD log, so just a reminder for you to do that. That's all from me. I'm going to hand over and get our session underway with Sam and Louise from Empower Development today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Manveen. All right, well, welcome everybody to our sort of exploratory hour to find out where we are in terms of early careers within insurance. Louise and I have spent quite a bit of time in the early careers space, a bit of an introduction to us both. So I'm Sam. I'm the founder, managing director of Empower Development. I set up Empower Development after going into the insurance market in a HR role and then going on to specialise in L&D, running a grad scheme and an apprenticeship scheme whilst at Liberty. And Empower Development do all kinds of different training things, but early careers is definitely something we're quite well known for, particularly because of the time we spent on TikTok. So we have an insurance TikTok page where we speak to young people who are hopefully looking for jobs in insurance, but also converting them into looking for jobs in insurance and then helping them as they kind of commence their careers within there. And I'm joined today with my colleague Louise.
Hi everyone, so as Sam said, my name is Louise. I'm the early careers consultant here at Empower. I've been with Empower Development since September last year, but I've worked within the insurance industry within an early careers role for about 14 years. So my background is really supporting in-house early careers teams, helping them hire their graduates, their interns, their placement students and apprentices. I've also created early career programmes, and my most recent role was at Aon, managing the UK early careers team, where we hired around 250 folks each year. So looking forward to the session today.
And as Manveen said, we're going to be keeping an eye on the chat box and the Q&A box as well. So if you've got any questions as we're running through, please feel free to jump in there. But what we're going to be looking at over the next hour. So when we think about challenges for early careers, sort of categorise this into three key stages that we look at. The attracting talent piece. So where are we sourcing our candidates? The induction, so how are we getting them off to that kind of strong start in those first few weeks and months? And then the advancement, how do we kind of move them out of that early careers stage and into that professional piece that goes on through there? But I think before we sort of go into these, it's just probably handy to find out who these are, these early careers individuals at the moment, and maybe kind of point out some of the key differences that we're seeing in terms of generational traits between this new generation, which are the Gen Z that we have coming into the workplace at the moment. We have 4 generations in the workplace at the moment. We have our baby boomers, who are generally in those kind of more senior roles, maybe even to those NED roles now as well, edging on to the kind of last stage in their career. We have Gen X, which is actually a smaller demographic. There are less Gen Xers in terms of population. Before we go into our millennials, which had quite a boom of young people, and particularly in insurance, we saw a large amount of new roles being created as this generation were finishing university. So we've got a lot of millennials in the workforce, but it's Gen Z that we're particularly talking about today. And Gen Z that I think often when we're talking about generations creates quite a lot of conversation because this generation has had quite a different upbringing to previous generations. We see that pace of change going faster and faster every decade. So Gen Z have definitely experienced that quite a bit more. And when we look at that kind of pace of change, there's different things that we see that influence us as we're growing up, particularly as we're going through our adolescence before we're coming into the workforce. Things like our education. So feel free to join in the chat if you relate to any of these, but depending on when you went to school, you may have been told what you were going to study. You may well have had one report at the end of the year that didn't have much context to it at all. But on this kind of newer end of the scale, there's a lot more choice and there's a lot more feedback and there's a lot more two-way conversation that goes on. But we've also seen the impact of COVID where that schooling happened a lot more independently, where individuals are kind of not having that opportunity to sort of experiment in the classroom through those kind of pushing boundaries years that we tend to do within our teenage stage as well. Socializing, we see some key changes here, particularly in the way of social media. We've moved from face-to-face conversation to doing a lot of exchanges over WhatsApp and often using things like emojis or GIFs to articulate our points rather than sort of expressing them in person. And that means that actually communication, when it's quite tricky, has become something we're not as used to. So having hard conversations, we're a little less used to than we had been in the past. So we tend to know a lot more people, we have contact with a lot more people, but what we're able to talk to them about, we have far fewer relationships where we can kind of be vulnerable and quite deep with people as we kind of move through the generations. Technology. I think this is in front of everybody's minds at the moment. Of course, we're seeing this kind of pace in technology changing quite regularly now, but we are seeing this generation who are very used to growing up with smartphones, having their own laptop, being very used to things happening very fast, and even things like technology when you're watching TV. I always remember back for myself, one of my key memories in my teenage years was waiting about 6 months to find out what happened after Ross said Rachel at the aisle. Whereas nowadays, if you're watching TV, you probably have to wait all of about 30 seconds for the next episode and you can watch it whenever you want. So we're sort of used to things being a lot more instantaneous and sort of being tailored to us. And then parenting. We've seen quite a change in parenting styles across these generations, but particularly for Gen Z, we're seeing parents being a little bit more hands-on or a bit more helicopter parenting going on, where parents are really trying to support and help them. And this does tend to mean that young people have less opportunities to maybe explore what they can do or maybe fall over and pick themselves back up than we might have seen in previous generations as well. And I'm just picking out a handful of trends here. We can talk for half a day just on this topic, but I'm particularly trying to pick out ones where you might see a bit of a theme in certain skills or expectations that we see then come through into the workplace as sort of differences between these generations as well. Okay. Now, I would just like to give to you some of my top warnings for Gen Z in terms of some differences. I'm conscious I don't know the generations we've got in the room. Feel free to share them in the chat if you're happy to. But here's a few watch outs, some key differences that we see come through. Now, I'm a big fan of a thumbs up emoji. If someone sends me a message, I historically would just send a thumbs up back. Yep, great, no problem, thank you. For Gen Z, this has a slightly different meaning. A thumbs up can actually be a little bit sarcastic, a bit like, yeah, well done. Hey, so it's not seen in the same positive light as it is for a millennial. So this is just a watch out for you. It's also a fun conversation to have across generations in terms of people's interpretation and see where those differences lie. My safe emoji to replace it with is a high five emoji. That lands well with everybody. A common conversation we have is around using the phone. So previous generations, if you wanted to book a restaurant, book a holiday, a hotel, you would be phoning things up. You would be speaking to strangers on the phone. If you had a complaint about a system, you would be phoning somebody up. Whereas nowadays, all of these things are either done on buttons. You're calling a taxi by pressing a button, or you're using a live chat to make a complaint. The interaction with strangers is almost non-existent on the phone. And then when you come into the workplace, it's expected. And because it's expected, people tend to use this phrase, just pick up the phone. Because if you've always done it, it feels like a just. But if you've never done it, that just is quite scary because you're thinking, well, hold on, I don't speak to anyone on the phone, let alone strangers on the phone. And this is a work setup and this is open plan and people are listening and this might be important and I might get it wrong. So there's actually a lot more going on in terms of that inner voice than it just being about using the phone that we have to kind of work through for people. The idea of networks is quite key. Quite a lot of us, or all generations, will spend a lot of time talking to people at similar life stages to us. So often people around our own age, and therefore we find ourselves in echo chambers talking about what things should be like at work or how they could be better. So it's really important really with Gen Z that as early as possible, we're sort of helping them expand those networks. So they're getting some kind of perspectives from people further along in their career, or even just people a year down the line, to make sure they're kind of getting that support, because the conversations they're having with one another and the conversations we tend to see on social media will often give a different expectation to what we see in the workplace. And a phrase to avoid, let's have a chat tomorrow. If we say to somebody, oh, let's catch up, or I'll speak to you tomorrow without any context, there's quite a high chance the individual will be worrying about what that conversation will be and will be catastrophizing it because they tend to think worst case scenario. And there's some scenarios that have actually led to this, particularly around COVID, where we saw those kind of mass redundancies that happened on a lot of tech companies that were quite public and talked about a lot on social media. So they have this fear that their job might be taken away from them very quickly, very suddenly. So without any context, you might think it's nothing because I'm just going to talk to you about that meeting we got coming up, or whatever you know is on in your head. If it's in your head, though, it won't be in theirs. So that little bit of heads up can give them a little bit more reassurance before going in. Okay, so let's go into these challenges then. So first of all, we're going to talk about this recruitment challenge. And there has been a theme, I think, since I joined insurance, and particularly I saw this when I first joined the market. It's important probably to say, when I joined it, I didn't understand that Lloyd's was insurance. I thought Lloyd's was the bank. It took me a good couple of weeks to work out I was working in an insurance company that had nothing to do with the bank. So I certainly sort of empathise with this understanding that young people often don't find out about insurance. So there is a conception that young people don't want to work in insurance. And I would say that if we take 100 young people, of course, I believe this is true for the majority. But what we have seen is the amount of young people that want to work in insurance has considerably shot up. So we are now in a very different situation. We are actually in a situation where we're seeing more young people wanting to work in insurance than there are actually entry-level jobs available. So if we go back to those 100 people in a room, if all 100 of them wanted to work in insurance, in reality, we probably only have jobs for 1 or 2 of them anyway. So what we really need is enough of a pool that we have a diverse and varied skill set in terms of our selection pool, but enough of a group that we can actually come up with some good processes to go through a good selection process. So some of the things that we're seeing here that sort of expand on this, seeing an average of 100 candidates for each entry role. Now, Louise at Aon would see a lot more than this, lots of thousands for each role. But at the same time, we know the bigger the brand and the longer the campaign, the higher the numbers are going to be. So we are seeing a spread depending on the organisation and how long it's advertised for. We have a group called Into Insurance. Into Insurance is actually a free course that we run every month, where we invite anybody who would like to get into insurance to come along to it. And we tell them a bit about insurance, but also go through their CV, give them some tips on assessment centres and so on. That follows up with a LinkedIn group where we share all the entry jobs that we see, and anybody can post an entry job in there. We will share this with you later if any of you have entry jobs you'd like to post. It's all free of charge. The whole idea is just to help the jobs get to the people that are looking for them. So we have over 3,000 members in there. At any given time, we reckon there's about 300 actively looking for a job. And then we have 35,000 followers on our insurance TikTok page, about a third of which, I believe, are looking for a job, about a third of which work in insurance. And the rest of them, I think, have no idea why they ended up following the page, but they're there for the journey. Okay, so this is our kind of moving along from the no one wants to work in insurance. We do still have challenges. So I'm going to show you some of the challenges that we see. I'd love to hear from you, any of the challenges that you see popping up in there as well. Hey, so from the attraction side, we see quite a variety. I mentioned Aon with the big brand, that they're going to be able to attract more talent. But what we find is unrecognized brands, it is harder for them to attract that talent, or for the talent to know the company that they're applying for. So we'll see a variety there. A lack of salary transparency is a bit of a challenge for us as an industry. And this isn't necessarily just salaries on the roles, but more kind of wider understanding that actually you will be financially compensated in this industry. You're generally kind of in a financially secure situation within a few years for sure. So we don't tend to shout about that. I think we're very polite about hiding, very humble about our kind of financial strength from an employee's perspective. So that is something that if you are able to share on a job description will always get you more applicants. The idea of a salary being competitive. Now, if for you competitive means 30,000 or 35,000, the individual might think you're talking about 24,000, 25,000. So they would generally assume lower than wherever you're starting from. We also see regional challenges. So jobs that are in London will attract a much wider pool. Jobs outside of London, I know you find it quite a bit harder to attract them, but we do have ways that we do support that too, again, free of charge, so we can share those with you as well. And then the last kind of attraction challenge we identify is often around the job descriptions in the terms of just jargon in a job description being really unclear for an individual who doesn't work in insurance what that job is or what they might be asked about during the interview. During the selection process as well, we've got some challenges. So the perception of AI. Now, this is something we've seen talked about quite a bit on LinkedIn, actually. So it's becoming a conversation there. The idea that AI is doing the shortlisting now and depersonalizing everything. We have not come across organizations that are using AI to shortlist. They are using technology. They have got automated sort of systems for recording and filing the candidates, but not for the shortlisting itself. There are lots of online tools to do assessments that can do shortlisting, but it's not AI based as yet. I'm sure that's going to come. But that kind of misconception often makes students feel like they are sort of one of many and not being treated as an individual. We also see this workload challenge that's coming through. So if you're in an organisation that's flipped to now getting hundreds of applications for an underwriting assistant role, then you might also find your recruitment team hasn't really got the capacity to dedicate that much time for these ad hoc roles as they come up. So that's often actually leading to a new problem, which is not wanting to put the role on LinkedIn and trying to reduce the publicity of the role in order to make sure the candidates they're applying are not too large a pool. And then this impersonalized process where the individual feels like they're talking to a machine or automated emails all the way through, which is inevitable, arguably, if we have got hundreds of people applying for roles. But there are a few ways that we can kind of make sure, particularly in rejection emails, that there is some support there for them as well. Hey. But all overarching, what we're seeing is the bigger challenge that we're sort of very conscious to talk about, because we can see the impact of this a few years down the line, which is organisations generally have less roles now that are task-based for entry level. So depending on when you joined the market, you might remember walking around with suitcases, scanning slips, having a dedicated box assistant to just go through and scan pieces of paper, and then somebody else to add in all that data, and then somebody else to check all that data. These jobs have, if not been removed, have certainly reduced in workload, meaning that a hierarchy in an organisation has gone from having a large amount of entry admin roles to a much smaller amount. And this smaller amount means that we have less coming in. And then I don't know where that noise is coming from. We got it. We've got less coming in. And as we've got less coming in, this isn't necessarily a problem at the beginning, but what we are seeing is individuals that we look for with 3 to 4 years experience that are sort of starting to progress into that role. That pool of talent is becoming considerably smaller. And with that, we're finding a real skill shortage coming up a few years down the line. We are only seeing this at the moment actually get worse. We are seeing less and less roles each year. So it's just really worth acknowledging that this is going to be, I think, a much wider issue for the market with a long-term focus on it. Okay, is anyone seeing any of these problems? If you are, do feel free to comment in the chat section with us. And I'm going to pass over to Louise to not let's just leave you with the doom and gloom, but talk to you about what you can do about it.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, so there are some top tips that we have to help you really manage some of the challenges that Sam just spoke about. So thinking about steps that you can include in your recruitment process to help to filter candidates, also helping to reduce that time to hire, or at least keeping them engaged during the recruitment process. We know that a lot of early career graduate roles, etc., the kind of hot time that they all are advertised is around September, October. And sometimes it can be quite a long time between a candidate applying and actually getting through to meeting the team in person. So by building in these proactive steps in the recruitment process, it keeps the candidates engaged with you as an employer, but it also helps you to manage the filtering of candidates at different stages of the process as well. When you're writing your job descriptions, Sam mentioned about sort of making them approachable for candidates to really understand what the role is all about. But it's also really important that we're clear on the expectations. The example here of office hours, you know, what are the working hours like? One of the things that's really linked to salary, when candidates are looking at other financial services, job opportunities, and particularly if salaries are advertised on those, they're looking at the investment banks and other consulting roles, and they see these big numbers and they think, wow, that sounds amazing, I'm going to be making loads of money. But in actual fact, the working hours are so long that if you look at how much they're paid per hour, in our industry, they're paid a lot more per hour because our working hours are much more manageable. They're much more sort of not necessarily a 9 to 5, 8 till 6, but we're not working late into the night all year round, whereas some of these other industries are. So being able to be really clear about those expectations is so important. There are lots of things that you can do to address the challenge of them not knowing your brand. So thinking about how you can engage with your candidates and build that relationship with them before they apply. So they get a feel for your organisation, they're really invested in you and working with you, so that when they apply, they're going to be prioritising completing whatever stage of the process you present to them. They're going to be keen to make sure that they complete all of those tasks and put a lot of effort into that because they've built that relationship with you. It also means that they may choose to apply for you as opposed to applying for other places as well, and because they've got that relationship and they like what they see and what they have experienced. So doing things like insight days is a really good way to help build that relationship. Sometimes I think we can go into a bit of jargon when we're talking about different criteria that we're looking to assess candidates on. And so it's important to try and be clear on the purpose around each of the different criteria that you're assessing. How does it actually relate to your company values, the role itself? What are you actually looking for when you're talking to them about the role? This is a really interesting one. So bringing your existing Gen Zs into the assessment, whether that's getting their opinion on the process, running little focus groups, or even, you know, throughout the process, whether that's an assessment day or in the interviews, you know, bringing them in to support with the engagement with candidates, but also to get their opinion on how does this feel from a candidate experience perspective. They're going to be able to give you a really valuable insight that might help you make a few tweaks to how you manage the overall recruitment process.
Thanks, Louise. Okay, so some ways that we can help with that. So there's some free support we have available, which is worth knowing about or sharing internally to make sure you're making the most out of these. Mentioned that we share entry roles on our Into Insurance job board all the time, but equally you can join that group and share roles yourself. The only thing we ask is that they don't require insurance experience, because it's just for anyone who's coming into the market for the first time. We then go through all of those roles as well as some other sources of entry roles and create a TikTok we share every week, highlighting entry opportunities across the whole country as well. So that's not just for London roles, but in all regions too. We also have our Into Insurance, which is our free course. This is sponsored by the World Company of Insurers. It's a free course that helps people get into the insurance market. I mentioned earlier, there's about 260 people that have done that course that now work in insurance. So when it comes to your communications, whether it's a rejection email once they've been through some stages, or just saying that you haven't got a role yet, but you want to be somewhat helpful, we are always welcoming for people to just be sent in our direction. We can then kind of put them through the process of that course and then onto some other support in there as well. So you're feeling like you're giving them some something that creates a bit of an opportunity in that rejection email. The other thing that we now have is a brand new tool that we've designed. We had people quite often asking us for recommendations for early careers, which isn't something we felt comfortable doing without doing any kind of assessment process, because we didn't have a way of measuring one to another. So we've come up with a solution that we think resolves this, which is an assessment platform. So we can take entry roles, share them with candidates on TikTok, and then when hundreds of them are coming through, we can get them to complete these skills-based tasks. So things like verbal reasoning, attention to detail, all kinds of different sort of stages. And then employers can select which ones of those they would like to use to shortlist, and you can shortlist. The candidates will give you a smaller amount that you can actually manage dealing with, communicating with, having interviews with. We don't want to be a recruitment agency. We often get confused as being a recruitment agency because we spend so much time promoting jobs. That is not what we're trying to do here at all. So what we are offering is a charge for that one. The £2,000 charge is actually redeemable against their training with us. So we know that that individual, when they start, that money, that rather than being used on recruitment, is actually redeemable for them to do courses, revision, and use any of our resources to help them get off to that good start over their first 12 months. So that's a new tool that we have available for you if you feel like the numbers and the time-consuming nature of this is becoming a challenge. So the next challenge we'll have a look at is the induction challenge. So how do we get them off to a strong start? And I'm particularly focused here. I think you come from very different size organisations, looking at the list of who signed up. Some of you much smaller, some of you quite a bit larger. Now, we find that the learning needs, that generally there are some consistent trends across the market, but the ways to deliver those become quite different depending on the size of your organisation. So we're often looking at technical knowledge, so helping individuals get up to speed with the jargon. The amount of jargon that we speak is hard to recognise because we're all so used to it. But also the job roles, so particularly their own job role, understanding what that is, but how it fits into the organisation, how the insurance market works, and then just that commercial awareness. And we've observed a bit of a drop in this since more hybrid working, because a lot of your commercial awareness comes from overhearing conversations, chatting to other departments, whether at the coffee station or just on your way walking around the market, to understand what everybody else is doing and how that fits together. So we find now the reason there's a picture of a road, I often look at it like there's the understanding what your job is, right? So that's like your lane, what you're going to be able to do in that one. Your manager tends to be really good at sort of upskilling you in your line of business or whatever particular skill set area you're going to be in. It's the things that are outside of that that are harder to grasp when you're not getting so much interaction and crossover with others across the industry anymore. So that's one of the areas we particularly recommend focusing on. But the other side in early careers, which is really key, because a lot of these trends that you might see across different generations coming into the workforce, they can all be taught for people to feel like they get a better start into the office, particularly things around office etiquette. So office etiquette, just kind of knowing what works, how often you should be in, what time you should be arriving, where you should be eating your lunch at your desk, or your headphones in, and all these little things that really feel like little things. And because they feel little, the manager often feels a bit picky maybe to point these things out. But if no one points them out, the individual will keep not doing them the way that it is maybe expected for quite some time. So making sure you kind of just really tell people what good looks like early on. The resilience piece, mentioned around the generation of kind of being able to fall down and pick yourself back up. This is really quite key. We see sometimes young people making a mistake at work and feeling like because they've made a mistake, they might lose their job because they just haven't had the experience of kind of fixing, resolving things as often as you might have seen in previous generations. So resilience is something that we can kind of talk about and experience, but really it is about trying to encourage them to go outside their comfort zones as often as they can, but not so far out that creates kind of panic zone for them. What I describe as self-management. The reason we're called Empower Development is because we're all about empowering people to manage their own development. Really believe that people should be able to look at the training and the opportunities for growth for themselves. Companies should absolutely support that, but it should be self-led. So self-management is something that if we can teach from the beginning, then individuals will be able to take the opportunities available for them and be a little bit more growth mindset, really focused throughout their career. And then finally, communication skills, linking back to that piece around emojis and GIFs and the sort of lack of face-to-face challenging conversations, because we can now use these things to just kind of say an awkward thing and then just put a awkward emoji next to it and try and get out of the response. I know I do that in my personal life. So if we kind of can see ways that we can get people comfortable and used to this nice and early on, then as those challenges arise, they're more equipped to be able to fix those. So some top tips for you.
Keeping communication with them before they start. So as I mentioned before, often you'll be running interviews and things and you'll be making job offers to early career folks, but often they start in the September, October time, which means that there could be a period of time between them receiving the offer and actually starting. So it's a lovely thing to try and keep that engagement by keeping that communication ahead of start date. It also helps with reducing the number of reneged offers as well, so people choosing to go to other organisations, accepting other offers. So just maintaining that relationship with them and keeping the communication, building that excitement for them to join your organisation. Where you are able to link start dates, particularly if you're not hiring lots of people, trying to link start dates so that they can join as a bit of a cohort just builds that network, a little bit of a support for them. But it's nice to have other people who are starting, who are in a similar position to them. They can start to sort of support each other as they begin their career in your organisation. Creating a plan for the first few weeks is so important because it gives them that level of certainty. They know what they're doing. If you think back to how they have been kind of in education, they will have had a timetable at the start of their school year. They will have a plan set up for them. Whilst we don't necessarily want to replicate being back in education, those are some of the things that they are used to having. So being able to create a plan gives them that certainty, but it also helps you to think, actually, what do I want them to learn in the early start at the early part of their job? Are there any great things that we could do to really help them get off to a good start when they begin their career with you? So as part of that, you're going to likely to have certain milestones that you want them to be working towards, and they will be things that you know, but it's really important that we communicate what good looks like at each of those milestones so that they are able to feel that they can achieve those different levels, those different stages, and achieve those goals. But also it's sort of managing their expectations, so they're not going to try and run before they can walk, and you're able to share the kind of steps that you want them to take, and ultimately once they've achieved that, they feel great, but also you're able to manage the expectations as well. And then having some kind of buddy, having peers, people who have been in their situation, in their shoes quite recently, is again a great way to help them learn. And particularly as we're working in those hybrid environments, you know, you're going to have people in your team who are working from home, and then people who are coming into the office. So I think it's really important that they do have that point of contact or a couple of people that they know they can go to, who are available, ideally in person, to support them, particularly at the start, to help them learn and build that confidence.
Okay, thank you, Louise. So a couple of ways that we can support in here. So again, some free support. We have an insurance starter kit. So this is a tool of sort of some of our very introductory into insurance videos. We make a lot of videos, hence on TikTok, but also for CII revision and so on. So we have a starter kit which has got some videos in it. It also directs to some podcast episodes that are particularly helpful, for example, learning about insurance jargon or some of the sort of key roles within insurance as well. That is free and available for anyone to sign up. In some organizations actually just put this on their intranet so people can go in and access that as well. We also have a networking group called Springboard, and Springboard runs networking events. In fact, this evening we have one we're running at Allianz, and next week there's one at Markel. We don't go to as many organisations as we can to run these so that they are very much felt like they are across the market. But anyone can attend them. We recommend it for people in their first 2 years. But the idea is this is for people who are new at networking. Now, I remember when I joined the market, we had under 35s. But if you're 19, the under 35s probably still feels a little bit intimidating. So we like to see Springboard, the reason it's called that, as the place that you can go, and then we will spring you and connect you to the other networking groups. So once anyone's in this networking, we will send round emails highlighting any events that the under 35s or Engine or YMC or any other networking groups that have got regular events that they can go along to as well and connect and find people. So particularly if you're a small organisation and you've got less young people around you, it's really important they find some people their age that they can go to and sort of talk to them and kind of bounce ideas off them and actually kind of get that ambition sort of through trading goals and sort of seeing somebody else who's just completed this, or maybe I should do that too. So that's free and available, and we run those throughout the year. The other thing that we do in Springboard is speed mentoring. So these are morning events, and we get mentors from across the market, and we're always looking for volunteers. So if you'd like to attend as a mentor, you're very welcome to subscribe to that list as well. But the mentees will get 4 mentoring sessions, about 7 minutes each, where they can ask different questions and then move along to another person. So we're trying to make sure that you get the opportunity to get those different perspectives, again, move out that kind of echo chamber environment and hearing other views on what you should be doing at the beginning of your career. We also have a whole suite of learning solutions in this one. We've actually just recently got our own training room. I think Louise is actually sat in it right now.
I am.
Where we can run our own courses. So we have our offices on the Minories, and we have a training room in there. We actually do quite a lot of training in September and October deliberately to be able to support those organisations that don't have a big enough cohort to run inductions. So things like introduction to insurance, and of course we have called On the Right Foot, which is all around office etiquette and the things that we mentioned to get off to the right start, that individuals can sign up to. We have a fast start program that's like a 9-month technical program, take you through all the different commercial areas. We also partner with apprenticeship companies, so you can access some of our resources sort of free of charge because it's through the levy. And the CII revision support that we have, that is a kind of very popular option for Gen Z who are used to actually doing a lot of their A-level revision on YouTube, and then coming in and getting big textbooks is a little bit unfamiliar for them. We've taken those textbooks from Cert, Dip and ACI level to turn them into videos and interactive quizzes and tests to make people's revision journeys a lot easier, but also a lot more adaptable to different learning styles. So for that induction period, we've got a whole range of ways that we can help there. Okay, so let's look at the advancement challenge. So what happens next? So once they've kind of had that induction, where do we see sort of the challenges sort of pop through in here? Now, this one I kind of haven't come up with your stereotypical results for, because we find this becomes a little bit more varied depending on the type of organisation. But really it becomes more of a transfer for those individuals to feel like they're connecting to the organisation and they're able to tailor their development plan to go in the direction that they're going to want to go into. One of the biggest tricks that I see around this is actually, rather than the individuals, it's about looking at the managers. So how are the managers communicating to them, and how comfortable do they feel communicating to them? So we mentioned earlier about setting expectations. One of the key reasons for this is to avoid the discomfort in conversations later on when you feel like maybe the deal hasn't quite been met. And now I tend to find that insurance is full of nice people. I'm sure you agree. Everybody generally agrees with that statement. And the thing about nice people is they generally like having nice conversations, and they find it kind of tricky to have a conversation where you feel like you might be upsetting the other person, or making them feel a little bit uncomfortable. And because of that, I think what a lot of managers do, and I know myself included, is look at a different situation and think, they might just work that out for themselves. If I just leave that for a while, they'll probably work it out. And as time goes on, they might not work it out. And then you feel awkward that you haven't said it earlier. And we have a lot of conversations that aren't really happening around expectations for the smaller things that sort of go on over time. So when we're looking at this, one of the things we really look at is actually how are we supporting the managers to be able to have clear conversations with their individuals, set expectations. So it becomes much easier to say, oh, actually, at the beginning, we did agree that for this role, like, want to see you coming into the office 3-4 times a week because I can see your development's key there. Or I did say I want you to have your video on when we have calls because I think it's really important to build rapport with the clients. Whatever it might be, if we set those things in advance, we can be sort of having those conversations later on. So the challenges start to come out once the individual's sort of settling in, and that's when it becomes really key that the manager is comfortable to raise anything that's not quite happening then. But we do want these individuals to be able to manage themselves a bit. It's not all on the manager. So we have got some sort of top tips for you and how we can be sort of advancing in that section. Hey, so we've got to reset these expectations. You'll be saying to people, this is what I want to see from you from 3 months, from 6 months. And the conversation sometimes at this point becomes more about them wanting a promotion. So them saying to you, what do I need to do to get this promotion? And that can become quite a hard conversation to have because it's very difficult to make a promise that you're not sure if you can keep. But if you can set expectations of the types of things you would like to see, the types of experiences you'd like to see them having, the types of ownership you would like to see them having, then that becomes much easier to pinpoint when these things are being achieved, but also where there still is some room for growth. And the individual generally, they quite want to know that they're doing more, and they're quite happy to put the effort in if they know it's for the right things. So what we sometimes see is if they feel like they're putting effort in and they're not really getting acknowledgement for that effort, then they might start to sort of dip in their motivation. But the manager might be thinking, well, you're putting all the effort in to the things that aren't really what I value. So making sure those expectations are clear and the bar is essentially rising as their time goes on. One tip that I often say for the individuals, so for Gen Zs as well as for managers, I think the word feedback can make us feel a bit nervous. Hey, you're going to be asked for a feedback form from Manveen later on. Please complete it. It makes her happy. We love to see it. At the same time, if I said to you right now, Katie, please can you give me some feedback on how this session is going? You probably have a sense of dread inside you. Feels like a lot of pressure. Hey, but actually, if we replace that word feedback with advice, say, oh, actually, can we talk about some advice you would give me around it? You still might not want to do it here or now, but we tend to be a little bit more comfortable sharing advice rather than giving feedback. So if you have an individual and you personally find those conversations quite challenging to share things you'd like to see them do differently, then if you change your language to be really clear that actually what you're doing is talking to them about how you want to support them, that you want to see them doing well, and let me give you some advice on the types of things that I think will help you progress into that role, rather than let me give you some feedback on the things you can stop doing to progress into that role, then for an individual that finds it hard to deliver the hard messages, it becomes a much more positive conversation. So it's often a much nicer starting point. Encourage that self-ownership of development. So initially you want to be setting that plan for them, being quite clear about what's going on. But over time you want to be directing them to networks, to communities, to different places that they can go and get their development or attend certain events. And then I would be encouraging you to check in with them on that. So each one-to-one or appraisals, however you kind of regularly do this, to say to them, like, tell me what development you've taken on for yourself. So what events you've been to or stretch opportunities that you've had. So they know that it's recognised, but also that they know that they're allowed to. The reason this is extremely important is a lot of Gen Z find it hard. They don't want to ask for things where the answer might be no. So you might know that if they ask for that, that's obvious. Of course, you'd say yes. They need to experience that and be reassured by that in order to start doing it. So it's a little bit of just at the beginning, really showing them how you want to manage them, but helping them a little bit more, hand-holding really a little bit more so that they become a lot more independent as that sort of time goes on. Celebrate those stretching of comfort zones. So I often think comfort zones, they're like elastic bands. So we can stretch them, but we have to kind of pull on them. We have to go outside of them to make them get that bit bigger. And when we do that, we will find that we're more confident, with doing things. We're more comfortable doing things that we haven't experienced before, and that resilience goes up as well. So when you start a new job, you'll find some people who are maybe coming in with very small comfort zones. They haven't picked up the phone, they haven't been in an office environment, they're worried about what they're meant to bring in for lunch and where they're meant to eat it. There's lots of things to concern them. Over time, they might settle into that really comfortably. That might happen quickly, that might happen slowly. But once they've settled into that, it's really important that we still encourage them to go outside their comfort zone. And that should continue until you retire, okay? And hopefully when you retire as well, because that will keep us young. We have to make sure that we are looking for those opportunities to do that, though. So it might be leading a meeting, or being able to attend certain things by yourself, or starting to put your name in and being the main point of contact, whatever it is, to just gently be pushing them so that they are clearly seeing their development, but also that shift is starting to happen, that they're owning the role. And then the other thing that we like to see from managers is more of a coaching conversation than a telling. So when somebody's new in their job, they need to be told, and often managers have a fear of micromanaging. Micromanaging's got a very negative connotation, and generally that doesn't feel like a great thing. At the same time, when someone's new in their job, they need to know every day what they're meant to be doing, and they need to be told every day if they did it right or not. So at the beginning, they need a lot more support. Now, if they get used to that, or they start to get dependent on that, it becomes much harder for them to take ownership and sort of do that development, do that problem solving piece by themselves, taking their own initiative. So if somebody comes to you and asks you what they should do, at the stage you're wanting them to advance, I'd recommend flipping it back on them, switching to a bit of a coaching, which basically means asking them some questions and saying, what do you think the options are? Listen to what their suggestions are, then maybe ask them, which one do you think is the best one? And then if they've got it right, if you agree with it, tell them that and say, yeah, well done, great. Like, thanks for checking with me, but comfortable you know how to do this. And if not, then you can help and work out and explore with them where the knowledge is between getting to the right answer. So this takes a little bit more time, conversation by conversation, but it transfers them from coming to you for lots of things to only coming to you when something needs to be escalated. So it allows them to kind of progress into that stage. Coaching, again, is a management skill that's really helpful for managers to learn how to do. But really, it's just about making sure we don't give the answer straight away. The catchphrase I like for this, one of my very first managers honed into me, which was never come to me with a problem unless you thought about the solution first. So that when people come to you with a problem, they've already done something in themselves. Okay, so how we can help in this section. We have, like I say, this one is a little bit more, it becomes quite tailored depending on the organisation. But we have HR roundtables, L&D roundtables, early career roundtables, all kind of subsections within this. We bring together people that work in HR roles or who are responsible for HR in organisations, so that they can actually voice what it is that they are looking for in terms of their business challenges or the sort of initiatives that they are trying to launch, and share with each other ways that they do that. Those are open to anyone, as long as they're in the insurance industry. They've just got to get in touch with us and we will add those onto those lists, and they happen every couple of months. We also have a lot of learning solutions in this section. So in addition to coaching for managers, we also recommend training for multi-generational teams. So I touched on it, like I say, for 5 minutes, but there's a lot of differences. And if we can understand why generations have different perceptions, then we can actually be a lot more empathetic as to why the differences might come out. I like to think of it as though we are all living life for the first time. So all of us are trying our best. It's just that depending on when we started in this world and the experiences that we have, what we think is right is going to have a different perception. So kind of understanding those differences allows us to have better conversations. Psychometrics are also really helpful. So for people to be able to be self-managed, for them to understand what their strengths and their weaknesses are, actually the things that frustrate them, how to manage conflict, that type of thing, then a psychometric is a really good tool to kind of boost that self-awareness quite quickly. Career management training. So again, this is back to that theme of empower development, getting them to manage themselves. So we have courses around taking charge of your career, managing your career, for individuals to really look at what their strengths and weaknesses are, and look at the ways that they can sort of take ownership in how to improve those. And of course, CI revision, we are very keen that people absolutely take this as far as they can, as something to give them that structured learning, but also to make sure that they have that commercial awareness that tends to come from those later modules there as well. Okay. So we'd like to open up to Q&A. would you want to come off mute and ask any questions in there? I'm going to just share with you some next steps if any of these are useful to you to take or share. You can send us an email if you'd like to get the free resources. We have those ready to share with you. If you just drop us an email, we'll send all of those over to you. We are also hosting a coffee cart day outside Lloyd's on Monday. So this is a day where we just give out free coffee outside Lloyd's. We might make some TikToks, but they are optional. You don't have to join in on those to stop by. But if you want to just come to chat to us and the team in person, you can absolutely do that then. And of course, we will be at the MGAA conference on the 7th of July. So hopefully we'll see some of you there as well.
I have just enabled everyone's cameras and mics. If anyone wants to come off mute, turn their camera on, can do. And again, just a reminder, the chat and Q&A. And I can see there's a really nice comment here actually from someone who talks about their own experience about managing 2 juniors and have found that asking them to give their thoughts when they ask questions really helps their development. And on occasion, they've also made me rethink what I could do. So that's really nice to get those insight into kind of both worlds.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah.
Another question, if you email us at info@empowerdevelopment.co.uk, we can send you all of the free resources that we've talked about. So just drop us an email.
They are all available on our website and our socials, but they're all in different sections. So if you email us, we can just give you them all in one go. But otherwise, yeah, if you hunt around on our website, you will be able to find them all.
Just checking to see if we have any other questions come through, but just a reminder, please do use the chat or Q&A function. I can't see any more questions come through. I will give everyone another minute or two just in case they're mid-typing. I'm going to just pop that link to our feedback, aka advice link. I chuckled to myself when I heard you say that actually. Yeah, we always welcome your feedback and or advice now, I'm going to say. So yeah, this helps us make sure that we're putting out the right content for you, that supports your development, because that's what these sessions are. I can't see any more questions come through, so unless you've got anything else to add or just want to touch upon today.
Yeah, well, what we're happy to do, Manveen, if people want to jump off, they can. Sometimes people like to hold on for a sort of mini conversation, mini question when there's less of an audience. We'll hold on till the last person leaves. If you feel like that's you, feel free to hold on. But otherwise, if you feel like you've got what you wanted from the session, head off, and hopefully we'll see you at Coffee Cart Day, or we can send you some information to see you next week.
Thanks everybody. Yeah,
thanks everyone.